Today I'm going to talk a little bit about this River Herald Scout, which is a new card from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. I think this is probably the only card that I'm considering playing in the Blue-White Familiars deck in Pauper. I did put out a video yesterday, sort of doing a recap from my Twitch stream, um, where I was able to 5-0 a league. But that video, I kind of watched it back, and that video is pretty terrible, so I appreciate the feedback. I tried doing some weird editing stuff and it did not work out. And also it was just kind of mean. So I will probably not be doing the Twitch stuff on my YouTube too much going forward. I'll just try to keep it separate. But anyways, yeah, thank you for the feedback, and hopefully this video will be of a higher quality than that one. So the card is 1 in a blue for a 1/2 Merfolk. And when it enters the battlefield, it explores. So what I'm interested about this card is, 1, that it costs 1 in a blue, and then 2, it has an enters the battlefield effect, which so the 1 in a blue part can be discounted by the familiar and also triggers Godfarer's Faithful. And the Explorers part, it's not anywhere near as good as drawing a card, but having end of the battlefield effects is always something good in the familiar stack, since you're running flickers, ephemerates, and snaps. And I think with the Explorer, the two things you're interested in are A, drawing a land, or B, being able to bin a deep analysis or a prismatic strand to the triggered ability. And obviously when you draw land, it's great. But in the late game, you really... Like, Explorers is just so much worse than drawing a card, basically. So I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this card. Although, I am interested in lowering the curve of the FAMS deck. Like, lowering the curve of your deck is always something you should be interested in. And so, like, you can't really compare this to Seagate Oracle because it's 2 mana, which is a lot less mana than 3. So maybe we can try to figure out if this card is good by looking at some of the replays. So initially, I took the list from, let's see, where is it? My second place challenge list, which was this. Took the main deck, and I was like, okay, well, if I'm gonna explore, I probably don't want to have Lord revealed in my deck. I probably just want to have lands instead, because revealing this off the River Herald Scout is not going to be as good as revealing a land. And then I also determined that Snap is not very good with the River Herald Scout. Like, snapping and replaying the Scout is actually card negative. So that's really bad. So I ended up cutting 2 snaps and moving them to the sideboard. Let's see, where's the list I played? It's here. And I also cut a counterspell. I ended up playing Prismatic Strength since I expected mono red to be a bit more prevalent. And yeah, I moved the snaps to the sideboard. As well as some other minor changes that are not super relevant. I said in the past that Snap is like the best card in the FAMS deck, and I still think that's somewhat true, but I just wanted to sort of like test this card out, and I think this card is pretty bad with Snap, all things considered. So that could be a wrong deck building choice, but that is the one that I went with. Yeah, anything else I need to say about this? Yeah, I suspect that this card is going to look very bad when your opponent is not attacking you, but if they're attacking you with ground creatures, I think it's going to be pretty reasonable. I suppose we'll see. I also considered playing Ponder in the preordained slot, because if you can ponder a land on top of your deck, you can get extra value with this, or if you can ponder deep analysis or something on top of your deck, you can bin it with this. But I ultimately determined that I think preordain is significantly better than Ponder, and you should just be playing 4 preordain before you play the first copy of Ponder, because it's just a better card. Anyways, and so that's how I came to this deck construction. So let's go over some of the matches. Okay, I'm just going to go over these last 3, I think. I think they were the most interesting ones. Okay. So that hand is pretty medium. This hand is really good. This is like exactly what you're looking for. I feel like the Zori's Chancery is just extremely powerful. And like it makes your opening hand so much better when you have Azorius Chancery. Anyway, so we're playing against Gates. And I feel like this hand is pretty good against Gates. Just having a deep analysis against a counterspell deck is always where you want to be. So I go ahead and cast the Preordain first, because I'm almost certainly going to play the Fam out, but I just wanted to make sure that my plans didn't change. It's always correct to play the draw spell before the non-draw spell. So like that turn, I was going to go Familiar and then Preordain, but there's no, like, you just always want to play the card that draws first. So I drew another Chancery, which is great. Opponent plays a Squadron Hawk. reveals 3 Squadron Hawks, then casts a Brainstorm, which tells me that they're looking for a land most likely, or else they probably would have waited to the next turn. So now I'm just going to try cast Deep Analysis. I decided to cast Deep Analysis here before playing the Faithful, because I can flash it back immediately, and if my opponent has a Dawnbringer Cleric, they don't get the chance to exile the Deep Analysis, which is always nice. So let's see. My opponent's attacking me. I think even in this spot where my opponent has 8 cards in their hand, but I feel like this game's kind of already over. It's not literally over, but it may as well be, just because like I have my mana developed. I have a fam, 2 Faithfuls. And funnily enough, my opponent actually decided to counterspell the River Herald Scout, which I thought was really funny. I don't think you're supposed to be counterspelling this, since it's not like it's kind of card negative. Like the best you can do is card neutral with this. But yeah. So I just have Deep Analysis that you can easily overpower the counter magic. This game wasn't maybe the best showcase of the new card, but I thought it was a fine game. So here I'm just holding up Remove Soul / Prohibit in case they cast Guardian of the Guildpact, because that's really the only card that they have in the deck that matters at this point. Like the main way I would lose is if they cast Guardian of the Guildpact and then we're able to pump it for like 10 damage every turn. But that didn't happen. So I cast Arcanomancer. They cast a counterspell. It doesn't really matter. I guess I counter back. And now I just have a counterspell loop going. So there's no, like, they're just super dead. Alright, game 2. I think this game is slightly more interesting. Alright, so I guess, can I go back and show the hand? I think I can. Okay, well, basically the hand was Mortuary Mire and a Plains, and it had like, it was really good otherwise, but I couldn't keep it. So I kept this hand. This hand is really bad, actually. Like, it didn't have the island, but I have to go turn 1 Mire, turn 2 cycle for an island, play an island, and I'm not casting anything until turn 3, and if I don't draw a land in my first couple draw steps, I'm not doing anything at all. So I honestly probably could have gone to 5, but I think this is a fine hand to keep, especially since you have a lot of 2-drops in the deck, and this is going to be a grindy matchup where the cards are going to matter. So I don't know, maybe I probably could have mulliganed, but I think it's fine either way. So I decided not to cast the River Herald Scout since my opponent's holding up a Red Blast. I expected this to get Red Blast, but I also just didn't really want to put down the negate. Like, I just want to keep holding up the negate. So they play an Idyllic Beachfront, which tells me they don't have any gates in their hand. So I cast this card, it gets countered. I still have yet to resolve the Scout, but the fact that this card is getting counterspelled maybe is good. I'm not sure. So I draw Chancery, which is great. Chancery is very good. My opponent casts Brainstorm on the end step, which I do not recommend. They cast a Cat, which this kind of shows me that their hand is probably just a bunch of counterspells, which is fine. Not great, but it's fine. At this point, they have 2 Basilisk Gates, so they can start pumping in for a lot of damage, but I'm not the most worried about it. Like, if I can establish this Arcanomancer Ephemerate loop, then that's obviously best case. So I cast the River Herald Scout, and it draws me a land, which is good. It's definitely the best case. Pass back to the opponent. And here I was like, okay, I can block and then flicker the Scout. So I block, go to Ephemerate, my opponent Power Blasts, and decide to negate, just spend my mana on my opponent's turn. I'm usually pretty happy to spend my mana on my opponent's turn, because now my opponent's tapped out, and I can resolve Arcanomancer to return Ephemerate, and then Ephemerate to return negate. Let's see what happens here. Yep. Play my tap land. I technically should have left up blue and white mana. It probably doesn't matter that much, but it is technically a mistake here. So now my Arcanomancer goes on a journey, and I lose the Ephemerate. But I do have the Nature's Chant to free the Arcanomancer. but I'm no longer looping Ephemerate. So I draw Ghostly Flicker. So now I can return either Negate or Nature's Chant. But I'm just going to return Negate because that can answer Journey to Nowhere anyways. Or the Modern Age. And now I can block and Flicker to prevent the damage from the cat. And put the River Herald Scout on top of my deck. Which isn't that much better than a random draw, but I think it is better than a random draw. Since it's basically just ETB Scry 1, worst case, which is fine. Okay, so they play a cat. Go to my turn. I play the Scout. Explore, draw land. So far, I think I'm 2 for 2 on land draws, which is pretty nice. Guess Brainstorm, so they're clearly pretty desperate. They just pass, which is odd to me. Like, that makes me want to believe that they have multiple counterspells in their hand. But then this just resolves, which is not great. So I reveal an Arcane Answer to the River Herald Scout, which doesn't really do much here, so I decided to put it into the graveyard. And then I draw Deep Analysis, which is fantastic. So now I'm just kind of going off. So, funnily enough, like, I milled the Archaeomancer with the River Herald Scout, and then I just played a Bio to put the Archaeomancer back on top of the deck. But I think the Archaeomancer here is much better now that I have more resources than it was previously. So, I think this play made sense, even though it is kind of a bit wonky. So my opponent casts Journey to Nowhere, they hit the Archaeomancer, I flicker the Archaeomancer in response, then they Power Blast. And there's no reason to... Like, it's pretty effective to flicker your Archaeomancer in response to Journey to Nowhere against this deck. Whereas against decks like, or any deck that runs Core Skyfisher, if you leave this Journey here with nothing under it, they can just pick it up later. So I do decide to Chump Block because I want to stay at 10 life so that I can flashback Deep Analysis. I'm not super worried about dying because now I have 6 mana, so I can, I guess, just flicker with 1 counter up, but it's not bad at all. I can block a cat and block a cat and then flicker to prevent all of the combat damage. Initiating the turbo defense, as Callie would say. Aiming it to return a Preordain. At this point, I'm just looking for a fam. It is kind of awkward that I only have 2 snaps in the deck. That is for sure. Play the Familiar out. Invoke a Molterfere. This game is basically just over, but I will, I guess, play out the rest of the game. Just because they can't deal damage to me, and I have a bunch of counters. So. Flicker, draw 2. I guess Magic Online does not want to work with me here, but regardless, I think you can safely see how this game is over. Alright, on to the next one. So I was paired against Bako, which was very scary. I was hoping that he was not on mono blue. I was lucky enough to win the die roll. This hand is reasonable. It's not great, but I can cycle for a plains and then play a familiar on 2 off the Ashbarrens. And then on the 3rd turn, I can play an Azorius Chancery and pick up the Ashbarrens that don't have a colorless land in play. I suspect that most Familiars players don't play this out as land nearly enough. It's definitely not something that happens every game, but it is really useful when it does happen. Sometimes you just need another untapped land. So, Bako casts Brainstorm, reveals 1 Snuff out. So I cast, okay, I missed a bunch of things. So I played a River Herald Scout. I hit an Azorius Chancery, which is great. So I drew a card. Then I played a Modern Age, drew an Ephemerate, and then I Ephemerate the River Herald Scout, draw another card. So it's really just working out from here. We go to Ephemerate on the rebound. My opponent casts Spellstutter Sprite. The fact that they had to Spellstutter Sprite the rebound on this is kind of hilarious to me because this is like not even worth a card on average. Like it's like halfway between Scry 1 and draw a card, I think. I don't know. Anyways, but yeah, then I resolved a Molterfere, and Bako was missing a lane drop, so he ended up conceding. Game 2. In this game, I think I made some pretty questionable plays. Like, I think I had the right idea of how to win this game, but I just kind of executed it incorrectly, which is something that happens. So we'll see how this game develops. But yeah. So they reveal a contaminated aquifer from the Lorne revealed, and then they play a Fairy Seer. Scry one at the top, one at the bottom. So I know that they have, yeah, they have this in the hand which they played, but I imagine they're pretty land light. Like when your opponent cycles Lorne revealed, it kind of gives you information about their hand, and that like it leads you to believe that they don't have that many lands, because if they had a lot of lands, then they wouldn't have cycled this. And because of that, I'm not really wanting to play my stuff out. Like, I can take 2 damage for a few turns and just develop my mana. If my opponent isn't developing their mana, then that's actually going to benefit me, even though I'm taking 2 damage every turn. A similar thing happens against the mono blue fairies deck, where you usually just take some damage to develop your mana, and then if your opponent ever acts, then you get to act first. So I suspect that on drawing the second Null Drifter, I was actually supposed to start casting these spells, because as you're going to see, I do end up running out of time. Like, I die with cards in my hand. Like, I think I had the right idea to try to pass for a couple turns and just take some damage. I think either on this last turn, or this next turn, I was supposed to start casting my spells. Like, I think I had a good idea. It just wasn't quite thought out well enough. The reason that I'm not casting my spells here is because if I cast my spells, my opponent untaps and then slams Monarch with a counter backup, then I can't actually resolve anything. Like, it's okay if Bako plays the Monarch, then I counter the Monarch, then he counters back, then I get to my turn where he's tapped out. That's not a great sequence for me, but that's an ultimately like acceptable sequence, because then I get to resolve something. But if I try to resolve something, then he counters, then we go to his turn, he slams Monarch, and he has a counterspell for the thing I'm going to play on my turn again, then I'm basically just super dead. So that was sort of, maybe not the greatest explanation, but that was sort of the reasoning behind the plays that I was making. I didn't really want to act first, because that would not have been good for me. Now I play Muldrifter, and at this point I'm dead to, so I play the River Herald Scout, which is actually pretty good on this board. Just a 2-mana 2/3, which is, I mean, not the greatest stats ever, but I mean, it's not the worst stats either. Anyway, so they have a kill spell, and then I block, and they have a ninja. And that is 4 damage. So I'm dead. Alright, game 3. I think it was this game where River Herald Scout was actually quite good. Yeah, so I decided to keep this hand, which is maybe a weak hand, but again, Azorius Chancery on the play is like the nuts, kind of, so yeah. And if I ever draw a Modern Age, it's great. So now I cast River Herald Scout now that I know it can't be countered. I see Godfareth's Faithful. I decide to mill the Godfareth's Faithful, since I don't really need the blocker. There's not really a point to having that card. Like, it doesn't... Since the River Herald Scout can already block ninjas, this doesn't really do much for me. And my opponent isn't actually, like, pressuring my life total at the moment, so... Like, when your opponent isn't pressuring pressuring your life total with ninjas and fairies, it's pretty likely that they're going to go for, like, a Monarch style game, so I think the discarding this makes a decent amount of sense. And now, once again, I'm just not going to do anything. So I think, actually, in this spot, I made an interesting decision. So on my end step, Bako cast Agony Warp, targeting my River Herald Scout. I have a snap and a negate. I decided to use the snap on the Scout for 2 reasons. One is that if Bako thinks I have Prohibit, then he might be he's less likely to go for a Monarch. Like, if he thinks I have Prohibit, the only reason he's going to go for a Monarch is if he's desperate, or if he has 2 Monarchs. And so I kind of wanted to represent that. And additionally, the snap is really only good against the Grimag Angler, and otherwise it's pretty poor in this matchup, because trying to snap your own stuff is just likely to get blown up by removal spells, and then trying to snap your opponent's stuff is not good, because all the other creatures have ETB effects. That's why I decided to do that, but it might have actually been better to cast Negate there, and force my opponent to either have another snuff out, or something of that nature. Anyways, then they slam Monarch, and I just die. At least that's what I thought. I'm just like, oh, okay, well, now I'm dead. But I'm not going to concede yet, so I cast Muldrifter. And now the problem is that my opponent just has a one-sided Howling Mine, which is tough. Now they cast Gurmag Angler with 2 blue ups. They have a counterspell. So I'm going to cast Arcane Mancer with the negate for the Um, Counterspell. And return the snaps that I can bounce the Grimby Gangler. So they attack for 5. I'm not going to block. So they Ninjutsu in the Okibu Gang. So I'll discard Deep Analysis and the River Herald Scout. And then they have a Bajukabog, which is really bad. This card I don't think is that good versus FAMs. I mean, it's okay, but I think it's not better than the other game plans. So anyway, so I cast a Snap. I get to go in, and I'm like, okay, well, the Arcane Mancer is going to die to Snuff out, but whatever. But it doesn't, miraculously does not die to Snuff out. And then I want to cast this Preordain now because once I have access to Spell Sorter Sprite, it's not very good for me. So they replay the Monarch, which is bad for me, but it's not actually that bad for me. Because my opponent still has to have multiple kill spells for not only the Drifter in play, but also the Drifter in my hand and the Modern Age in my hand. So in the Modern Age, when you have multiple lands in your hand, it's just great because it's basically just drawing free cards. Draw a Fam, a Scout, another Fam, Preordain for another Fam. Yep. The Augur, reveal Brainstorm, cast Brainstorm. I still thought I was super dead, I think, at this point, but you can keep playing. You cast Murmuring Mystic, which Murmuring Mystic in this spot is actually kind of bad because like you just spent 4 mana on effectively just like nothing at this point. Like it's just a 1/5 for one turn cycle at least. Like I know it promises to generate value over time, but I think Murmuring Mystic versus Familiars is not at its best. So here I cast 2 Fams. I think technically I'm supposed to cast a Scout before I play the second Fams. And actually I hit Deep Analysis off of the River Herald Scout, which is kind of just great. So I flash it back, target me. I draw this Last Breath, and then I was kind of frustrated because I didn't leave up white mana, so I can't actually exile the Murmuring Mystic with the Last Breath. But I think I actually tapped correctly despite not being able to cast this, just because of how my hand is set up here. So I attack for 2. I was kind of worried they were going to cast Snuff out in combat and try to block with an illusion, but I don't think that's a good play. So my opponent is a good player, so I didn't expect them to make random mistakes. So they attack with the Thorn. So double block. I'm pretty fine if my opponent's fighting over these random ground creatures with removal. Like if I double block and my opponent has a removal spell and they blow me out, like sure, that's fine. I'm really just worried about the Monarchy here. Once again, this is another spot where the Modern Age is great because I'm just discarding excess lands that I have no use for, which is great. I attack for 2. My opponent's at 10 because they've used multiple Snuff Outs, I think. Maybe just one. Just one, actually. So I guess Deep Analysis, target myself. I could counter back here, but I don't think this, like, Deep Analysis is super important. And this is why Deep Analysis is so damn good. Like, I cast Deep Analysis, and I got a counterspell, and then I flashed back and got another counterspell. Like, there aren't really other cards that trade for 2 counterspells in the Familiars deck. I don't know. Maybe that isn't actually as impressive as it feels for me, but when you trade your Deep Analysis for 2 of your opponent's best cards, it feels fantastic. Anyways, now I could have also started with the Last Breath on the Murmuring Mystic, but I decided that I wanted to wait. And then I exile the Murmuring Mystic, and I still have the Monarchy, and then my opponent concedes. Final match of the league against Floyza. I know this opponent, and I know that they're very good. I lost the die roll. I think you're supposed to be keeping these hands, although I don't know. I feel like if you have to mulligan this hand, then you should maybe just be mulliganing the deck. The thing is that like you have so many 2-drops in the deck. Like if I look at the deck real quick, I can draw any of these or any of these cards, like 24 draws that are plays I can do. That's like maybe not actually quite that many because these counterspells don't really count, but I think it's reasonable to keep this sort of hand. And I lost the die roll and I was against red, and I drew another 5-drop. So, I mean, there is a real cost to putting 5-drops in your deck. Don't get me wrong. Bolt Drifter has not aged particularly well, but I still think you have to play 4 in the Fam's deck. Despite the thing. And so this is another spot where like I think a weak player is gonna just keep jamming stuff. But the only way I ever win is if my opponent, like if I'm able to counter my opponent's stuff on their turn, and then untap and slam stuff. And my opponent just knows that like they don't have to cast their spells; they can just keep hitting me until I act first because I'm just dying, and so I'm dead. Go here. Right. Game number 2. So I had a bunch of sideboard cards for this matchup. I boarded out all the snaps, deep analysis, modern age. I think I even boarded out a Mold Drifter for the last game because I figured out in game 2 my opponent was playing the 1-drop version of the mono red deck. I don't think we saw. Maybe we saw the new Goblin once or twice, which I think that card is really good. The Garbage Guide, I think, is the nickname we're giving it. That card seems really good to me, but I didn't really see it. Like I think the card is at its strongest on turn 1 or 2, and I didn't end up seeing it on turn 1 or 2 this match, so I didn't get to see the full power. So my opponent casts a synth, flips a land, plays a Swift Spear, flips another land off the synthesizer. I was quite frustrated at this when they flipped their lands off the synthesizer, but I can't be too mad about it. Like realistically, they probably have lands in their hand too, so they can kind of like their deck is this. I didn't realize it at the time, but their deck is only 1-drops, so like it doesn't matter what they flip off this, they're just gonna be able to play it. They flip another mountain, which is probably actively good for me at this point. I make these blocks. I think these blocks make sense, and they cast Mutagenic Growth on this just so that I can't rebound the Ephemerate, which I was surprised about, but ultimately, like, I think I made the correct blocks. So this hits a Sunscape Familiar, so I get to sort of scry 1, make a 2/3, which is not nothing on this board. I think I'm winning this game most of the time, given what's in my hand, but you can imagine a scenario where this 2/3 is actually needed to block. I think in this sort of matchup is actually where this card is going to shine the most. I mean, it's again like not the strongest card ever, but just being a creature with power and toughness is important. Like a lot of these creatures with toughness but no power are not very good against the 1/1s because if they have more attackers than you have blockers, they still go to chip in for damage for free every single turn. But having these random 1 power or 2 power creatures helps to stop my opponent from getting damage in. At this point, just thin the deck because it's free. And then I have an ephemerate rebounding. My opponent doesn't know about this Hydroblast. And once I get this ephemerate going, this game is over. So if they're not able to stop this ephemerate loop on this turn, then the game basically ends. And they are aware of that, so they concede. All right, game number 3. I think my opening hand in this game was really strong. I forgot exactly what it was. Okay, so I have to mulligan a 1-lander, but this hand is really good. I'm on the draw, which is unfortunate, but having this Riverhail Scout that I can play out and at least get some value when my opponent kills it with a bolt is pretty nice. I mean, it's still not the greatest like thing ever, but I don't know. I'm still not sure if this card is good or not. So they cast an Epic here. They go to attack. I decide I'm like, don't want to kill this. I want to give them priority one more time. And they just activate the blood. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll just kill the Goblin Blast Printer. And then go to my turn. Oh. I draw an untapped land, so now I decide to play the Riverhead Scout out just to block the Epicure, so that I have to force them to use a burn spell instead of developing their creatures. And in the case if they don't have a burn spell, then they don't get to attack me, so that's good. So now I play a Faithful out and hold up the Blue Blast. I think this is better than developing the Familiar, since my opponent can have Goblin Bushwhacker in this spot. So they flip a Swift Spear off the Synthesizer crack. I think they mulligan this game. Yeah, we both mulligan to 6, so. They decide to Alpha Strike, so I kill the Swift Spear to prevent the damage. And the Riverhead Scout is actually really good in this spot. I mean, I know, like, it's basically just a 2-mana 2/3 that let me look at the top card of my deck, but if all these creatures had no power, then my opponent could just freely attack in and get damage in. And now they're basically in the spot where they can get damage in for free. So I don't know. So I play the Archaeomancer, return a Blue Blast. They're going to get the chance to kill the Archaeomancer in response anyways, so I decided not to play the land out first. Okay, so they played an Implement, crack the Implement. They attack me, and yeah, this is the same thing where I have a power. They have a creature with power, which allows me to stop their whole army from attacking me. So I draw Ephemerate, which is like the best case scenario because I actually boarded out a lot of my card advantage. I boarded out a familiar, not familiar, Muldrifter, 2 Deep Analysis, and a Modern Age. So the Ephemerate is just going to allow me to loop counterspells. And they had the Goblin Tomb Raider, but it was too late. But I mean, it's hard to say that this card was bad in this spot since like I don't think any card in their deck is going to be able to help them there. At least not any card that costs 1 mana. Anyways, so I was able to get the 5-0. I'm still not exactly sure if this card is good. I'll probably test it a bit more. I'm pretty sure you don't want 4 copies. Maybe you just want 2 copies. Like, more stuff to do on turn 2 is always nice, but it is pretty low value. Like, I don't know. More testing is required. If you have an opinion, I would love to hear it. Maybe you think this card's terrible. Maybe you think it's great. I would not be surprised if this card sees no play at all after this like week, but I would also not be surprised if this did see some play after this week. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.